Now, if you look at politics, politicians, the media, manifestos, all of this world that we are absorbed within at the moment in the UK, and you begin commentating on it, thinking about it, forming opinions on it, this is a wonderful thing. But what you have to realise is that what I'm trying to say to people is, beyond all of that, beyond the opposition manifestos and politicians and the media, there's a field of absolute tranquility, peace and quiet. And what I'm inviting people to do is to steal a poem, actually, is to meet me in that field. This is what I'm stealing the words of a poem, I mean by that. But to meet me in that field of silence, beyond the oppositions, the manifestos, the politicians, and so on and so forth. And as a human being, without any attachment to it whatsoever, look at it and say, is this minefield of persistent election of persons not to bring any sort of true, lasting change within our society, what is best for us? Or am I just choosing between the two things inside the mainstream that I've been told can bring possibly some change one way or the other? But calm and collected society, who are educated, who are disciplined, who can read and take pleasure from it, who are not plugged into the media and thus so addicted to the flashing necessity for entertainment like that it's difficult to not have it, addicted to the substances, the junk foods. A truly critical, informed, disciplined society who dwell in that field beyond that ball of chaos could easily create a true and free democracy and say, the only way democracy for the people will work is when we are mature and we accept that actually having the media involved in democracy is not correct. Because the media can swing it. They can program our minds with the TV programs. They can swing it one way or the other. It's not just, it's not fair. The money can swing it, as we see in America. The most well-funded campaigns get the most coverage, and thus they become the most talked about thing. They become the reality of the people absorbing the false light. What if the light you absorb is only natural? And what if the only place you can go to democracy is one place in a country, a singular website, which has each political party, which has each political leader, their manifestos, who they are, biography about them, and maybe a few videos they made. And then as an educated, informed, mature society, instead of being like dazzled lemmings by the media, we go there, we read, we make some critical decision making, and we make our decision based on that alone. Hey guys, so, you know, I don't want to become sort of a political commentator on social media by any measure or means, but I am the sort of person who always has to verbalise, and the fact I have a YouTube channel means that I will verbalise on there the song that is in my heart. I think is the best way I can put that. Now, I of course can see that the media is saturated with the upcoming election in England, and I've been pointing out many things about this election, and I don't want to come across as someone belligerent towards the current political system, democracy as a whole, or individuals within their political parties. And I think people think I am being quite belligerent towards Jeremy Corbyn. Now, what I was trying to point out, I don't know Jeremy Corbyn as a person, as a human being, and he seems on the face of it a very lovely person, but I also know that I've watched the movie Independence Day and I saw giant spaceships in the sky. Doesn't mean it was real, doesn't mean what I'm seeing is real. I need to meet a person, you know. I can't just absorb what the TV or the media shows me as a true reality until I meet that person. But we have to have an element of faith, and he seems like a really nice guy. You know, I've got to admit it, but the problem I have, it seems like the media, it just feels like the media is making him a nice guy, and it feels like almost like the Tories are throwing the election at this point. Now, what I want to just touch on is, looking at it that way is so unusual to people. And I've had many people say angry things at me, saying, oh, you're a Tory, and calling me an idiot and all this stuff. And, you know, ultimately, guys, I tried to explain this in a Facebook comment earlier. I'm coming from a different space in awareness, I think. a different way of observing it. Now, I feel in my life I have some space to speak about spiritual practice, and with it the development of the human mind and vehicle. I'm not saying I'm more developed than other people, but I've undertaken things that many human beings in our society have not, like several prolonged water fasts, where I abstained from all caloric intake. And these are things that we should take note of. Some of the greatest minds in history have participated in things like fasting and discipline. And they do change you completely. Completely changed me from a mainstream lout who would drink and smoke lots of drugs and just overindulge in party life and chasing girls and so on, to someone who has become a person who can hear the subtle messages from spirit, which led me to Tanzania. And before you scoff at that and say I'm a lunatic because I think I hear God, since I listened to what God asked me to do, over 600 children are liberated from child labour here in the last 3 years. As of today, 65 children are now in our full-time guardianship, and over 100 dogs have been rescued in my time here as well. I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't followed this sign, spiritually speaking. So I have some space to speak. And what I actually want to say is, if you want to view any event, not just this political election, any event, if you want to view it in a clear and unattached way, which we must, you cannot view something with emotion. When you look out on the world and you look out with the lens of emotion, you skew your perspective of what's going on because you're attached to ideologies. You might look at a human being, and instead of being able to observe the person and their being and what's going on with them, you have an ideology that condemns something they're wearing, perhaps, so you never see the human being. This is because you look out with emotion. You create a lens between you and the world. Now, if you look at politics, politicians, the media, manifestos, all of this world that we are absorbed within at the moment in the UK, and you begin commentating on it, thinking about it, forming opinions on it, this is a wonderful thing. But what you have to realise is that what I'm trying to say to people is, beyond all of that, beyond the opposition manifestos and politicians and the media, there's a field of absolute tranquility, peace and quiet. And what I'm inviting people to do is to steal a poem, actually, is to meet me in that field. This is what I'm stealing the words of a poem, I mean by that. But to meet me in that field of silence, beyond the oppositions, the manifestos, the politicians, and so on and so forth. And as a human being, without any attachment to it whatsoever, look at it and say, is this minefield of persistent election of persons not to bring any sort of true, lasting change within our society what is best for us? Or am I just choosing between the two things inside the mainstream that I've been told can bring possibly some change one way or the other? And the truth is of the matter that it's not what's best for humanity. A true full overhaul of the system is what is best, and Corbyn's not speaking about that. He's not speaking from the position of telling you to go to that field and to look in objectively and see the way things are. He's selling you the concept of the idea that his manifestos and agendas will take you there eventually. But Jeremy Corbyn will die someday. And when he does, the government he leaves behind are still going to be connected to the Fabian elitists. The head campaign, election campaign person is still going to be for the Labour Party. Well, it might not be then, but he still was and has influenced it as such, an aristocratic 40-year member of the Communist Party. You see, guys, these societies have been organised for centuries. And we say we're going to get change right now by voting this. No, actually, if you want to get change, I would invite you to step away into that field. And you've got this crazy mismatched ball of mainstream media and politics going on, and you just come out of there into that field of tranquility, and you look in and you observe it. And when you come there, you can meet other people in the field. Because you know, the truth be told is that those persons who started things like the Labour Party, the Fabian Socialist Movement, the Freemasonic Society, they became so functional within their human body that they too went to that field. And if you go to that field right now, and if you begin to even grasp the concept that you can unplug from there and you can go to that field, the alarming thing is, as you look around you, you will see the tables with the elitists sitting there from that same place, trying to organise your life that benefits them in a way that benefits them. You see, there are many layers to governance and change on the planet. And I also said this, that if a guitar is well tuned, you can get good music from it. If a human being is not in tune, if they are not indulging in the right aspect of reality, and they are constant in a false reality, are constantly in the reality of people who were sitting in that field I speak of, beyond all of this nonsense and chitter-chatter of the mainstream, and created technology to fragment that reality by understanding it and beaming it into your home. Light, by controlling light and beaming it onto you. Whoever controls that light and the things that are said and the information carried within that light controls your reality. And it's too far away if you've never come out of that field, never come out of that mismatch of mainstream politicians, media, this, that, manifestos, this, and if you never come out of there to the field, you will never really even understand what I'm talking about. But if you come out and join the many people who are in that field and are looking in on the world from there and saying, this is not right, this is not just, then you become a well-attuned human being, and just like a correctly tuned guitar, the best music will come from you. And so I speak that song from my heart, because I see a problem when the country I was brought up in, all of the younger generation have just been subjected, without any shadow of a doubt, to one of the greatest propaganda agendas of our time. And I don't mind if there's a necessity to use propaganda to get the well-being of the planet. If people are so misguided and fickle that they can't understand the true reality of things and come to the point of making decisions that are best for them without it, then I would understand that. But I can't say that people are like that. And thus I can't stand up and say it's okay for anyone to be thought over in that way as a malleable, mouldable material of consciousness, who is always pinned in that ball of chaos and never gets a chance to come out to that field and look back in on it and say, hey, that's not right. And there are many chains, many elastics that stop you from walking out to that field, because you have your responsibilities. You have your bills to pay. You have your children to raise. You have the media pulling you back in, telling you, no, 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 this is where you'll get your truth. You have political spheres saying, no, no, this is where you'll get your change. All the while pulling you back. And if you would just walk out to that field and look back, you would say, hey, I'm not letting you pull me back in there anymore until I've made my own judgments based on my own discernment, not by the influence of the media. And if we have a society of people who are not plugged into that chaos, which is designed, and has been designed using things like critical theory, it has been designed using technology, it has been designed using the enslavement of using fractional reserve banking and central banks. And if we can just have a society that's not plugged into there, we can have a real democracy. Because you can then have a democracy where everyone is sitting from the perfectly attuned aspect of the human vehicle, disciplined, not running off with their emotions into violence and aggression and so on and so forth, or reacting heavily to things or triggering from simple things, but calm and collected society who are educated, who are disciplined, who can read and take pleasure from it, who are not plugged into the media and thus so addicted to the flashing necessity for entertainment like that it's difficult to not have it, addicted to the substances, the junk foods. A truly critical, informed, disciplined society who dwell in that field beyond that ball of chaos could easily create a true and free democracy and say the only way democracy for the people will work is when we are mature and we accept that actually having the media involved in democracy is not correct, because the media can swing it. They can program our minds with the TV programs. They can swing it one way or the other. It's not just, it's not fair. The money can swing it, as we see in America. The most well-funded campaigns get the most coverage, and thus they become the most talked about thing. They become the reality of the people absorbing the false light. What if the light you absorb is only natural? And what if the only place you can go to democracy is one place in a country, a singular website, which has each political party, which has each politician, a political leader, their manifestos, who they are, biography about them, and maybe a few videos they made. And then as an educated, informed, mature society, instead of being like dazzled lemmings by the media, we go there, we read, we make some critical decision making, and we make our decision based on that alone. We don't get emotionally involved and attached and wound up by things that are being said on TV and emotionally stimulated by well-worded speeches, which of course are going to stimulate you. Things, people calling out about animal welfare. Everybody wants animal welfare this day and age. Everybody loves animals pretty much, except for those who are neglecting the animal welfare of the ones they eat and so on. But this is just a development of consciousness. But animal welfare and the most people see it like things like fox hunting as barbaric. Of course people want fox hunting banned, but then it just gets to the point where it feels like a silly pantomime, because of course the Tories know this, so why would they even make it part of their agenda and expect to win votes? You think with the data mining and the algorithms they have connected to the internet and social media and all of that goes on with the ability to monitor us, that they don't know what the collective want? They don't know that by banning fox hunting as a regime, they're going to gain more votes. They don't know. Of course they know. They don't know that by saying we're going to cancel all tuition fees, they're going to get the youth on board. You see, from the field, that would make sense. But from within inside the ball, you can't even stop to say so. You can't even stop to even accept that that might be a reality. But believe me, it's a reality. Because the most important resource is how a human being thinks. That's why data mining is so massive. That's why it's such a big business now. Because the way you think is the most valuable resource to the powers who are elite, wealthy, and abundant. Because you and I prop them up as working class or middle class persons. Us buying into their system props them up. So, all I'm saying is, you can vote and that's fine. But you should also seek to reach that field and become attuned enough to reach it. Then when you become attuned enough to reach it, you can become an effective human being. And just as over time, elitists and aristocrats have formed societies and groups so powerful that right now you're about, many of you, to elect political parties that those societies created because they knew that things would take time and that things long-sighted ways work. Short-sighted do not. It takes a long time to mold society. It doesn't happen overnight or it doesn't even happen in one term of a prime minister, a president. It takes time, and they know this, and they stick with that time. They hold on to it, because from the field, they can teach others. So, that means that the people can also begin to get organised and working out how they can establish true, fair and just democracy. Because right now, unfortunately, because they are morally corrupt, likely by the heavy amounts of wealth they've had, as it would seem that money creates a devastating weakness in a human being, a want for self-preservation and a lack of faith and morality. Not always, but in the most part it would appear that that's what happens to human beings who are garnished with too much wealth. They preserve it, rather than using it to end the pains and the wars and the suffering of the innocent today. Now, because of that, when they start societies and movements, those societies and movements are corrupted. Because these people are in tune, but they have too much to lose. And they're also dependent on the material for their well-being. So, what I would say, to wrap that up, is that imagine a real democracy, where people dwell in that field, not influenced by the media and all of that nonsense, but where they are truly centered, educated and disciplined human beings. They are not behaving immorally or incorrectly. They are not running around drunk on a weekend and vomiting on the streets. And this is just not part of our society. Not only that, but equity comes before all else. By equity I mean that equality sounds great, but equity is truly the best source. If you equally distribute everything to human beings, what if someone is devastatingly sick? They need more resources than the others. That's equity. Equity is providing for everyone what they need at any given moment. And that's the truest form of equality. But what about a society like that we work towards? And the problem we have is the elitists whose minds are clearly corrupted, because we know they've been funding wars and they've been using propaganda to get their own means and what they want, and they think it's cool to operate as wolves in sheep's clothing as their emblems depict. They think it's okay to open financial schools to erode the economy so as it then passes down to the working class, and they are harmed by that. We can see from that even if parties like Corbyn's leave a country behind them that has nationalised services, and then the next party comes in that the elite decides should go in due to the fact they're controlling that media bubble that everyone's plugged into, that chaos, and they bring that next leader in. They're that further step closer to what they've always sought, the New World Order, which is a new means of governance which forces everything into a singular point, a world government. But it's going to be brought in by the same people who have used the same ultimately psychopathic means to achieve what they've achieved thus far. And thus we the people will continue to suffer. So vote, but think long term. Think of your children, your children's children, and ask yourself, What do I do after I've voted? And if you go out to that field I speak of and unplug from the system and stop letting it distract you, someone might just come up with that original idea that changes things forever. When I unplugged from the system, my original idea was an off-the-grid, self-replicating, self-supporting, charitable community for those who live in poverty. 3 years later, well, not 3 years since I unplugged, but 3 years since I began, I'm not so far away from achieving that. Imagine that. Where the only industry that supports everyone in this community is understanding Mother Nature. Imagine a society in that way. I'm not saying it's the answer, but I'm just saying it's the original thought I acquired whilst I was in that field. In that same field where those elitists often dwell to arrange and organise your life. But they do it, they bring into that field their own immorality. Others can go to that field with a clear conscience and with a heart that simply wants genuine equality or equity equality, as I hope for. So I'm not a Tory. I'm not Labour. I'm just a guy standing in that field, shouting into that ball of chaos, saying, take a breather and ask, is it okay to allow our children to be exposed to propaganda in this way? Even if it is to bring about an agenda, an agenda that seems to be a benefit for the people. But at the same time, when you look in from that field, regardless of all of that, it seems that we've been coerced and there's no choice, because I just feel like looking in, like the Tories are throwing the election, and like the media has painted Corbyn as nothing but someone you can love. Even by trying to attack him, they do so. They make you warm to him, and they know humans will do this. They know it. So, I believe in democracy, but I have a very awful feeling in the pit of my stomach that our current democracy is extremely hijacked, and we are being coerced and manipulated and programmed and dazzled because we can't get out of that ball of chaotic political, media, financial mess and reach that field and look back and say, this is not what's right for us. That ball's not what's right for us. There's got to be something more. And choices presented to you from that ball, they are not necessarily what is best. They are just what you've been offered. So, okay. God bless, guys.